geopolitical situation in Syria has garnered global interest. The interim government of Syria, led, of course, by the militia HTS and its leader, Ahmed al-Sharaa, has baffled the world, interestingly. Its relationship or its past links to the Islamic State led to a lot of concern initially about what this new governing authority in Syria would mean for the Middle East as well as for the rest of the world. But in the last couple of weeks, we've seen a public diplomacy offensive that has seen Syria and its new government look to normalize relationships in West Asia, as well as undertake high-profile meetings with a number of senior Western diplomats and politicians. What exactly is happening here? Joining me now to unpack some of this is one of India's most experienced diplomats when it comes to West Asia, Ambassador Anil Trigunayat, who has been India's former envoy to Libya and to Jordan. Ambassador Trigunayat, thank you so much for joining us here on India Today Global. Could I ask you to begin by explaining to us what you see happening on the ground right now? Perhaps just a refresher on what has happened since the fall of the government of Bashar al-Assad and the rise of this new governing council led by Ahmed al-Sharaa and the HTS.
Yeah, thank you very much. In fact, the Syria is one of those events which was not really expected what happened there. But it has happened, and this is something that we have seen in Afghanistan, we have seen in Bangladesh, we see in different parts of the world nowadays. Many of the unknown things or unexpected things happen. But at the same time, this was something that has not happened today, tomorrow, yesterday, but it was something that has been waiting for last over a decade, since the Arab Spring. I was ambassador in Libya, and I remember at that time there was a design for regime change through internal inducements and external interventions. So, in fact, in the after Libya, the next destination for regime change agenda of the West basically was removal of Bashar al-Assad. And the Bashar al-Assad would have fallen, but for the support that he started receiving from Iran and, of course, from the Russians. Mm-hmm. And the Russians had learned their bitter lesson from Libya, where they were sidelined completely by the Western countries and through manipulation of the resolution of the United Nations, where NATO started bombing. So Russia intervened in 2015, sustained it, and in 2022, actually, we started thinking that he was under control totally. But then we know that the Russia-Ukraine war has been prolonging and has been stretching the Russian assets. So Russia has been basically distracted significantly because of the Russia-Ukraine war and has been unable to protect its air base and the naval base and diverted most of its assets. Besides, we saw that Assad, which had normalized ties with the Arab world, became part of the Arab League, was also feeling a bit emboldened. And so at that stage, the Iranians also were stretched because we have seen Hezbollah was decapitated, the leadership, and the Hamas was not making any grounds. So Israel was really giving them a big thrashing. And at that stage, this was completely set. And in that, we saw that the group HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which has been there, which has changed several times from ISIS to Al-Qaeda to Jabhat al-Nusra and all that, different groupings, seized the moment at the behest, basically, of the Turkey and of with the support of the United States. So several groupings just came, and we saw how quickly, within a week, the Assad regime fell. Assad was in Russia till about 30th November. And there he tried to extract some assurances from the Russians. But in my view, Russia probably cut a deal with the Turks that their bases will not be touched. And they did not have the capacity to also intervene. They could not even assure the Iranians that if Iranians came in, they would have the air cover, which would be provided by the by Russians. So in that kind of a scenario, we saw that Assad had no option but to leave. His army was completely bereft of the fighting spirit. They did not have any support, and they are not said to be a great army either in any case. And so we saw that Israel played its card. It just took over the Golan Heights completely, including the Mount Hermon, which is strategic. And we saw that immediately after that, a lot has changed because this leader, currently HTS leader, changed his name back to the one from Jalani to al-Sharaa, Shara, and then he started talking in a very moderate tones that there will be no compulsion on anybody, there will be minorities will be looked after. He even made two women at the highest level, including the one on the central bank governor for the first time is a lady. And so there is a little bit of a hope, and that was probably, I hope that continues because that is a welcome change. The people were, extremely happy for the simple reason that Assad had a window of about 10 years of doing something better for his people. 13 million people are displaced both internally and externally. The refugees are essentially based in Turkey, in Jordan, in Lebanon, and so they all wanted to come back. And there is those who are living in, they were in extreme poverty. The American sanctions had really damaged the economy to a great extent, despite the fact that the UAE and several other GCC countries were talking about it. So that's something that I believe brought his downfall also. He did nothing for the people. They were in abject poverty. So they really welcomed this onset of the people.
Could I ask you a little bit about what you have seen play out in terms of Syria, the new government? You said that they're, of course, trying to put on a much more moderate face. There have been speculations right from the clothes that Ahmed al-Sharaa, as you were mentioned very rightly in your piece just a couple of days ago, right from the clothes that he wears, Ahmed al-Sharaa has tried to change the perception of his government around the world. Could you tell me a little bit about why he's doing that? Could you tell us also a little bit about his past links? He of course has the HTS has had links with the Islamic State. So there is this conscious attempt to rebrand. Could you explain that rebrand, the past links of the HTS, and what they're going for now?
You see, the HTS, when it became before that, it was Jabhat al-Nusra. And they were an extension of the Islamic State. And the Islamic State had sent them to Syria, essentially to carry on with the war. But then they decided that Jabhat al-Nusra should merge with the ISIS, which Jolani at that moment refused. And he changed the name and he got affiliated with Al-Qaeda at the time. And then eventually he also dissociated from them and he started this new outfit, which is called HTS, and got a small area in the northwestern part of Syria in Idlib, which he started governing and which was governed with the help of the Turkey, with the help of Americans. And he was continuing to talk to everyone. So I think that this was a joint project of US and Turkey. But then nobody in the process bargained. The Turkey has its own very existential interests in eliminating the Kurdish forces, which are supported by the United States. And they are called Syrian Democratic Forces, which are part of the northeastern part of Syria. So Turkey has been playing a role for a very long time, attacking them and trying to remove them because they're asking for an independent state and all that. And they call them terrorist groups. And so created the Syrian National Army. The Syrian National Army, along with the HTS, came out, fought or whatever, and took control of the new Syria, so to say. Now, in order to make new Syria acceptable, there are a couple of things. One is that Syria is one of the most sanctioned countries. So, and it was part of the axis of resistance of Iran. So it wanted also to be out of that bracket. And HTS is that way playing very smartly. They immediately talked to the previous prime minister who handed over power in a way. And then they appointed another prime minister of their own foreign minister, intelligence chief, defense chief. And now they are trying to get more people co-opted in that. So in a way, they are trying to convey a message that this is an inclusive kind of a government, which is only interested in Syria's development. And how do they get the funding? Because they need a lot of money in order to prove, because once the euphoria is over, the people expect results. For that, they need immediate assistance. Now, the Americans, Barbara Leaf, Assistant Secretary for Near Eastern Affairs of the US, visited. She used to be with me in Libya. And she came here and she offered them, and there used to be a $10 million bounty
Hmm.
on his head. That
Right.
was removed.
Hmm.
And that's ironic because this guy appeared on CNN and all kind of TV channels, and they did not know where he is.
Hmm.
So they removed it. They also agreed for certain sanctions to be lifted for 6 months or something, except the previous government entities. But the actual money immediately that is required from him is from the countries that are in the Arab world, especially Saudi Arabia, Qatar. Qatar immediately reopened its embassy. It was very much dead against Assad. In fact, all the GCC countries were against Assad regime. But over time, when they realized that Assad has been stabilized, they tried to open up the relationship, except Qatar. Now, Qatar supports the Muslim Brotherhood, and they are also part of the same kind of a philosophy. So Qatar was the first one. Their Minister of State was one of the first leaders to visit and assure all the assistance. Then we have these Americans coming in, then the British, the German and the French foreign ministers came here, and they were pretty much impressed. And they say he's a pragmatic leader. They are asking him. I hope they are not making the same mistakes that were done during the Taliban time. What they did, the Americans signed the Doha Agreement. And so now today, I mean, he has visited already Saudi Arabia, he has visited Qatar, he has visited UAE, he's visiting Jordan, and maybe some other countries. As far as Iran is concerned, that is a country that has been supporting Assad, holding him up, and have part of the Assad's time, this was part of the axis of resistance, an important part, and a bridge for Hezbollah in Lebanon, where from the arms, ammunition, assistance from Iran could flow easily. So Iran has got the biggest strategic hit by this change in the region.
Could I ask you a little bit about how what's going to happen in the coming months when it comes to the HTS and its relationship with a number of Western countries? You mentioned, of course, America making an outreach to this government. There have also been meetings with the Foreign Minister of Germany, Annalena Baerbock. She also met with the top leadership of the HTS. Could you tell us a little bit about how Western nations are approaching what's happening right now in Syria? And could I also ask you, more to the point about this sort of conversion in image? How much of this is heartfelt coming from the HTS? How much of this is political convenience to secure diplomatic normalization in the weeks ahead?
Surely, I mean, there is a political expediency that he sees, and to me, he appears to be a very smart man, and he has understood what the from Taliban's, from other countries' experiences. That unnecessary war is not going to take him any far. Plus, he doesn't have that kind of a strength. First, he needs to bring the country along together, not the people on the streets alone. But there are thousands of people, like in Iraq, what happened. So he has learned his lessons from all those experiences. Now, he has a bit of a history that he, dissociated from ISIS. Then he dissociated from Al-Qaeda, saying that I believe in moderate and I only believe in strength and development of Syria. I don't have any designs outside. So in that sense, ideologically, he's a bit different. And that is something probably music to the ears of the West. Now, Western countries, of course, are talking about human rights. They are talking about women empowerment and things like that. And that's what he's already trying to say. So his statements are there, but one will have to see how it eventually plays out. Secondly, even the Arab countries, they don't like these non-state actors. They don't like this kind of a Muslim brotherhood, and therefore they will not tolerate any extremism coming out of there, because they are the only ones at the moment who have promised assistance. For example, Qatar has just rehabilitated their airport, Damascus airport. First flight was from Qatar. Saudi Arabia has promised a lot of assistance. UAE is already trying to invest, and for reconstruction also in Syria. They will require them very much part of it. As far as Western countries are concerned, the lifting of the sanctions by themselves is a major relief. Now, it has been done for 6 months. The Europeans are very keen in that because, see, whatever it is, Syria is an important part of the Levant and region. And at one time, it was a major power in the region also, like along with Iraq and Egypt. But today, we have the Gulf powers, who are the major powers. Turkey is the biggest gainer in the region, actually, because, but now again, as I mentioned, that we'll have to see how Turkey and US align their interests. Both are NATO countries, but Turkey is more independent-minded. They have greater relations with, very close relations with with Russia as well. And so they are looking at their own interests, apart from removing Kurdish. So they will continue to retain their major influence. And how will they align it with the rest of the European countries? Maybe Turkey will like to cut some deals with them also. More importantly, with regard to the Russian bases. Because at the moment, it seems that Russia has an understanding with them. And the statements made by Jolani about Russia are also like that. They said Russia is an important country, a powerful country, and we would like to maintain relations. We have historic relations, defense, military, everything dependent on Russian supplies. So I think that if they open to that, the Russians will be more than happy because they are not in a position currently to militarily or otherwise intervene in Russia. So it is a win-win basically for Turkey, to a great extent for the Western countries, whose finally they have been, after 15 years, they have been able to have to complete their agenda of regime change, removal of Assad.
Could I also ask you a little bit about India's interest in this whole crisis that we've seen play out over the last 10 to 15 years? India initially, and of course, no one knows this better than you. You were, of course, had a front row seat to what was playing out. India, of course, advocated non-interference and non-intervention. It said that foreign powers should not interfere in Syria. It supported certain powers like Russia, for example, launching airstrikes in against ISIS and fighting ISIS in Syria. Could you tell us a little bit about what India's interest was? We seem to have a fairly cooperative relationship with Bashar al-Assad. We gave aid to Syria when it was struck by an earthquake in February 2024. So could you describe the relationship that India had with Bashar al-Assad over the last 10-15 years, what India's position was in the Syria conflict?
Well, India had historically very good relations with Syria. It believed in one Syria. It did not believe in external interventions. It wanted a Syrian solution by the Syrian people for Syria. And India has also supported, given assistance through the directly as well as through the otherwise UN agencies for the refugees, Syrian refugees. I myself had handed over checks to the Jordanian government when there were 1.2 million Syrians refugees are there. So India has been providing, and as far as the humanitarian relief and supplies are concerned, we have been giving them. We have also been talking to Assad government all through. So definitely the reason is one, Assad regime was one of the regimes that supported India on the Kashmir issue. They were very vocal about it in the Arab world. Secondly, India wanted the country to stabilize and help them as much as we have certain investments as well there. So those are temporarily, I would say, in a little bit of halting mode. But at the same time, we have an ambassador, we have an embassy, and we have never closed our embassy in Syria, whenever, even despite during the wars and difficult times. And even now, during this transition, our embassy continues to work. We are providing huge capacity building assistance, which the Syrians will need in times to come. And I'm quite sure that soon the Indian government will also start talking to them once the country stabilizes, and we'll have to see how it is taken. In my view, the Arab League seat of Syria will continue. That also provides us an opportunity. We have great relations with Saudi Arabia. We have very superb relations with UAE. All those countries, they're partners in our I2U2, IMEC, and the other projects, regional projects. So I see that this will, as far as directly, we did not have such a major this thing. But the fact remains is any instability in the Middle East, in Western Asia, is inimical to our interests. Because we depend a great deal on our energy security, our economic engagement, our ease of navigation or maritime connectivity, as well as our 9 million diaspora. In fact, during this changeover of the government, India was able to evacuate 79 Indians who were there on pilgrimage or working there. So what I gather from our embassy is that everything, as far as Indians are concerned, there is no threat to them. Things are going on smoothly, and let us hope they do. And I hope that whatever Jolani and his government promises are able to keep, and the country stabilizes, because Syrians have suffered tremendously in the past 15 odd years.
Right. So if I can ask you one final question on just India's perspective on what has happened over the last month or so. You mentioned, of course, Syria's historic support for India's position on Kashmir. India's, of course, also given aid, and the two countries have generally had a decent relationship. Could you tell us a little bit about how India will be approaching this new government of Ahmed al-Sharaa and the HTS? Will it be open to engagement, or will there still be some concerns given the past links of the organization to Islamic extremism?
Well, I think terrorism is one of the biggest threats which India never condones and fights, whether bilaterally with Pakistan or internationally. So we have always been supportive of fight against that. That means that any kind of extremism or terrorism coming out of that. But, frankly, geopolitically, what we are seeing is that the legitimization of the non-state actors. And when, with the help of certain countries, they come into power, this gets normalized. Even though I'm sure that the problems of al-Sharaa are not yet over, because there are many groups in the country which are more basically, I would say, radical. And they have not agreed to lay down their arms and join the national army. Besides, there are about 30 nationalities which are part of his system, which is in Idlib, which is purely highly conservative Islamic system, that he has been ruling that part of northwest Syria. So how is he going to bring about this, all these groups together? So I think India at the moment will watch and wait for some more time to see how other countries are doing, how many countries are going to recognize. And it's only on the fact that we already have an embassy in Syria. We have not closed. Our ambassador is very much there. So we are open to engagement with them. And I'm quite sure we'll start with some kind of humanitarian assistance, and then at low-key level we'll start and wait for, I would see that some kind of a signals coming from there. We have not recognized Taliban as yet, but we are doing business. We have opened the embassy. We are trying to complete the projects there also. So I think that India will follow that kind of a model.
Understood. Ambassador Trigunayat, thank you so much for your time, for explaining to us what's happening in Syria right now, India's interest in the conflict over the last 10-15 years, and how things are likely to move on with the government of Ahmed al-Sharaa in power right now in Syria. Thank you so much for your time, sir, again. And thank you so much to our viewers for watching us here on India Today Global.